Hello, I'm Sean Shepard with Clean Skies News, and I'm here in Copenhagen at the United Nations Climate Conference. I'm here with a familiar face who everybody has seen on Clean Skies News. This is Mr. Andrew Light, who's a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. Andrew, thanks for taking time to talk with us.
Great to see you.
First off, what are you doing out here in the cold? The conference is inside. What's going on?
Well, as of today, they've severely limited the number of NGO observers who can go into the conference. So there's something like 300 tickets or so. So very few people from the American NGOs are going to be able to go in today.
Well, tell me, what kind of effect would that have on negotiations? Are you still able to do your job?
I think we can still do our job. I mean, we're sending out messages every day. We're in communication with the parties inside. You know, we've got phones, we've got email, we've got our Blackberries, and we're talking. It'd be better to be inside, but this is the way we're going to do it.
Andrew, what is your overall impression of the progress of the talks? We know that Japan has pledged the $15 billion, I believe $11 billion of that coming from public finance or public monies, but a lot of that is contingent on a framework coming out of this. What do you think?
I think Japan has actually set the tone for what we're going to see now. A lot of, we will do this, but only if you do that, lots of stuff. So we will put numbers on the table if you put numbers on the table. We've seen that before. It's really going to start ramping up in the next day and a half.
You also have China saying that they feel that it is unlikely that any sort of agreement will come by Friday. If that does not occur, what effect does that have on the whole process, and especially what effect does that have on the climate legislation that's in the Congress right now, in the Senate?
In terms of the process, what China said was that they don't think there's going to be a full treaty coming out of this meeting. But we've known that for months. And in fact, in November at the Beijing summit, President Obama and President Hu talked about the possibility that you would end Copenhagen with a first step of a two-step process. This would be a political agreement. I think that what China said today is that finally they're ready to talk about that political agreement. So I think it will be dropped onto the floor at some point today in advance of the leaders coming tomorrow. If that happens, I think that in fact gives us time in the United States to finish our job, to finish our legislation until the next meeting of this summit, which will be in Mexico City in November, although that could be pushed back as early as July of 2010.
A lot of progress from deforestation, RED. A lot of people have said that they feel that the RED text would actually be the blueprint of sorts, of the framework of how this would work, especially from the financing sense.
Absolutely, and I think Secretary Vilsack coming in yesterday and laying that bombshell, $1 billion from the U.S. for forestry in conjunction with Norway and a couple other countries to really get RED moving in the right direction, in addition to whatever the U.S. adds to that $10 billion quick start funding, was very good. And it's amazing here if you think about it. I've been coming to these meetings for years, and it used to be you couldn't get people to take forestry seriously. It was like the last thing they wanted to talk about. And now here we are in Copenhagen, and it looks like this is going to be the big success.
Andrew, COP15, is this one going to go down in history as a game changer, or what? Will this be momentous? Will this be remembered? What are your thoughts on that?
I think either way it's going to be a game changer. If it's successful, if we get the first step of this two-step process to finish up in Mexico City, then it was the tipping point where the world moved forward to where it needs to go in terms of curbing carbon pollution. If it fails, then I think that is probably the end of this process, and we will have to move to other forums like the G20, like the Major Economies Forum, to talk to the major emitters only, the 16, 17 largest economies, the 20 largest economies that are emitting the bulk of emissions in the world, and to get them to come to an agreement on limiting their emissions without, frankly, sometimes the circus and the drama that this process produces.
Exactly, and moving from here, say an agreement does come out of this, where do we go? When do we see this being ratified? When are things coming together and actually treaties becoming legally binding?
Well, President Obama said that whatever comes out of this treaty in terms of an interim political agreement has to be implemented immediately. And he is committed to then moving forward to a legally ratifiable treaty. Now, it took Kyoto a number of years to go from, we finished the language of the treaty to the full ratification. That will take a while, but we hope that at least there will be benchmarks set out there so that countries will need to know where they need to go from 2012 to 2020.
Which track seems to be moving faster, the LCA or the KP track?
Well, the LCA track is moving faster in terms of the language that's been put on the floor. So that's gone through a number of revisions. It is being talked about. The number of bracketed segments, the things that they actually disagree on, are actually shrinking now. The KP is pretty much standing stable, but it's got powerful backers. It's got a lot of people in the G77 bloc of developing countries saying, we want the KP, we want the Kyoto Protocol, and nothing else, and nothing added to it. And so it's standing pat. I think that a lot of countries like the United States would like to move forward beyond a protocol like the Kyoto Protocol beyond this severe distinction between developed and developing countries and how we allocate required emissions cuts. But I think the KP will survive this process if this process moves forward, and then we'll add some other agreement to it, something coming out of the LCA track, and there'll be some kind of combination, some kind of a linkage between the two treaties. So if you get one movement on one side, you'll get another movement on the other side, something like that.
Financing, public or private?
I think that it's going to have to be a combination of both. I mean, in the short term, in the quick start, it's mostly going to be public. I think the Japanese commitment was also quick start funding. If when we go into the medium range and the long range, there's no way to hit those big numbers, 100 billion a year, unless you're talking about public-private. And everybody I've talked to in this city in the last 2 weeks has said that.
But do you think Americans, can that be sold to Americans to say, hey, I'm willing to ship this money over to another country so that they themselves, I don't know where this money is going, and here I am with my economy and jobs are going down.
Absolutely. You're going to have to be able to prove that American assistance abroad in terms of getting other countries on the pathway to a low carbon economy actually also benefits us. And a lot of folks, including my organization, have been looking at particular proposals, like what would happen if the US and China cooperated on carbon capture and sequestration? What would that mean in terms of ramping up that technology and getting Americans to work on putting this stuff out there? And the results are very good.
Well, I guess we'll have to see. We have the rest of today and the tomorrow to see what comes out of this. Andrew Light, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
And I'm Sean Shepard with Clean Skies News here in Copenhagen at the United Nations Climate Conference.